Hi everyone, welcome to Yoga with Heini. I'm Heini, and in this video we're going to go through the mountain pose in detail. Mountain pose, or Tadasana as it is in Sanskrit, is a standing pose. It's a basic standing pose, and although it is one of the most basic standing poses, there's a lot of things to look at and focus on. The basic purpose of the pose is to strengthen the feet, ankles, strengthen the legs, strengthen the whole connection from feet up into the spine, strengthen the core. And it's quite a good pose to practice our posture. And we are going to start looking at the pose from the feet, and we'll build up. And first, before we look at the actions we do in our feet, take just a moment, maybe even with eyes closed, or at least don't look at your feet, just to kind of walk from one foot to the other. Let your hips, let your feet move. And without looking at your feet, find a place where you feel steady. So that you have your feet about under your hips and you feel you are aligned from your hips down to your feet. And then once you have decided what that place is, what feels steady, you could open your eyes and just have a look where your feet go. And quite often there is some rotation, or we can see some rotation in the feet. It's actually coming from our hips, from higher up, but it's expressed in our feet. And often the feet are a bit turned out or a bit turned in, and surprisingly often the feet are asymmetrical. If I'm now looking at my feet, my left foot is a bit more turned out and the right foot is a bit more kind of just turned forward. So there is often some asymmetries in our feet, and that's perfectly fine. Again, remember, it is coming from higher up, and we need to build the pose from our core outwards. So make sure you're not telling yourself to fix your feet. So if your teacher tells you to stand, turn toes towards the front of the mat, it doesn't mean that we need to perfectly align our toes, our feet towards the front, but allow those natural rotations to come from higher up, because it's probably a much safer and a much steadier place for you to build the pose. That said, once you have found your feet roughly hip-width apart, we start to look at how we could activate the feet. So remember, we are strengthening the feet in this pose. We are looking for activation from the feet. And it's also a really good opportunity to have that strengthening in the feet, because our feet, the muscles in the soles of the feet, might often get quite weak. We are using shoes a lot. We're not necessarily walking bare feet too much, and that's how the muscles at the soles of the feet can get quite weak. So here's a good opportunity to focus on the feet more. So once you have your feet in your mountain pose, spread your toes just a bit on the mat, on the floor, and then bring your awareness to the big toe, little toe, and the heel. So it's like a triangle in our feet. We are grounding through the base of the big toe, base of the little toe, and the heel. So forming this triangle in both feet. And then we have this inner arch in both feet. Start to just slightly kind of lift up through those arches. Or maybe a better word would be to say, kind of suck up through those arches, because if we lift up, we might end up just rolling onto the outer edge of the foot, but that's not the purpose. The purpose is to start building engagement, activation in those arches. Don't think about how big or how small the arch is. We all have different sizes of arches. So it might be just the arch coming tiny bit off the mat. For some people, it comes off the mat much more if there is already a more kind of higher natural arch. But the idea is to start building some engagement, lifting or kind of sucking up through the sole of the foot, through the arch of the foot, and lifting that support onto the inner thighs, into the pelvic floor, lifting up into the core, into our spine. I like to think of it as a suction cup. So I'm grounding the edges of the feet and then lifting up through the center, like the center of the suction cup would lift up. So that's the idea. We are activating through the feet, starting to lift that support up into the legs, into our spine. But keep grounding through the big toes, little toes, the heels. So we're not rolling onto the outer edges of the feet. Then the knees. Now, if you have a tendency to kind of lock the knees, or if your knees go into hyperextension, kind of overextending the knees, then make sure you keep the knees just tiny bit bent, like micro bend, so the muscles around the knees stay active. So we're not just hanging on the joint, relaxing onto the joints. Remember, it's an active pose. We are strengthening the legs here. And then we'll lift up into the spine. Your spine could be in like a neutral alignment, so neutral spine, where it naturally sits. Or what might be happening in the spine is what we call axial extension. So axial extension means that we are actively trying to kind of lengthen the spine. So actively lifting yourself up away from the legs, and you're actually creating some length in the spine. You're trying to make yourself taller. So it's a bit more active action along the spine. Either way, whether it's a neutral, a bit more relaxed alignment and arrangement in the spine, or the axial extension, we are looking for subtle engagement in the core. Yeah, because we want to support the lower back. So you don't want to kind of let your tail, like a duck tail, pop out, the belly pop out and sink into too deep into the arch in your lower back. But you want to maintain that subtle support, lifting just gently in through the pelvic floor, gently in through the lower belly. And also checking that we are not leaning the upper back and then popping the hips, the pelvis forward. I'm kind of exaggerating that now, but just so you can see that we're not kind of leaning back. But again, bringing the pelvis, the shoulders on top of each other. So finding that more natural, neutral alignment from pelvis through the back into the shoulders. Then arms, we have different options for the arms, and you'll probably see different teachers teaching different options for the arms. A basic variation would be to have arms just next to your sides. Some teachers, some schools of yoga teach to have palms together. Or you might reach arms also higher up. So you could also extend the arms over the head. These are different variations. There's no one right or wrong way to do it. You can also have opportunities there to strengthen the shoulders and the connection from arms to your torso. I'm going to go back to the feet one more time, back to the ankles. There's one variation that you could practice to strengthen the feet, the ankles even more, and create that connection from your feet up into your core and find that strong alignment. And that is to come up onto the balls of the feet, onto your toes. So lift the heels off the mat. Have arms where they help you to balance. And here, just again, finding that strong support from feet up to the core, checking that you don't start to lean back, you don't start to lean forward, but you are lifting yourself up. And checking that you're not collapsing onto your pinky toes, so you don't let the ankles, feet collapse, but you are engaging through the inner thighs. Remember that support coming from your feet to your inner thighs, also going through your inner feet, ankles, everything kind of, reaching towards the center line. It's a bit more difficult to do when you're speaking, but just having that reaching to the center line through the inner legs, so you don't collapse again to the outer edges of your feet. So that's one way to practice that connection from feet and strengthening the feet, strengthening the ankles more. And once you are in that pose, check that you don't puff your chest out. Sometimes when we are really focused on the breathing, we are really focused on not collapsing, not hunching back, we start to overcompensate and we start to puff the chest out. So again, just soften through your chest. So you can keep the shoulders, keep the chest, the rib cage area free to move, but soft. So we're not puffing the chest out, because that's going to take us out and away from the alignment as well. There are different breathing patterns you can use in mountain pose. You could practice belly breathing, especially if you are in a more neutral alignment in your spine, so you're not doing that active axial extension. You could send your breath down to the belly as well. If we are in that kind of active lengthening up, lifting up, if we are in that axial extension, doing belly breathing becomes quite impossible, because we are lifting in and up through the belly. And then it's better to breathe into the rib cage. So doing more that kind of lateral breathing, sending the breath more to the rib cage, because the belly is lifting in, so that we don't end up in a situation where we're kind of losing that control and gaining it back with each breath. But we can maintain that axial extension, that support, breathing more to the rib cage. If we are doing the option, the variation where we lift up onto our toes, where we lift the heels off the mat, you could try different breathing patterns going into the pose and coming out from the pose. One that's my favorite is to exhale, lifting up, exhale, coming down, because exhalation is a bit more grounding action in the body. So then as we breathe out, I feel that I'm kind of pressing down through the feet, through the balls of the feet more, and I can easily stay more grounded when I'm breathing out, coming into the pose. And same, exhaling, kind of releasing slowly out from the pose. But you could as well inhale, lift up, just keep yourself grounded so you're not kind of lifting yourself off the mat and finding yourself all wobbly in the pose. You could also inhale, lift yourself back down. So with the inhalation, the idea would be that you're kind of lifting yourself up as you lower yourself down. So there is kind of this idea that exhalation is a bit more grounding, inhalation is a bit more uplifting, but there's no right or wrong, and you might actually experience inhalation being more grounding for you, exhalation being more uplifting. But just play with the idea and try to keep that groundedness, even if you are lifting up onto your toes. So you're not finding yourself wobbly in the air. So you can keep the feet, the ankles grounded. For mountain pose, block, a strap or a wall might be quite handy props. I'll start with a block. One really nice way of using a block for mountain pose is to bring it between the legs. So this would be to kind of remind us to use the inner thighs, maybe strengthen more that connection through the inner legs as well. So bring block between the thighs or between the knees or even between the ankles. You can try it with different placements. And then just very gently squeeze that block between the legs. You start to fire the inner legs. If you are practicing the version where we lift up onto the toes, if you have injuries in the feet, ankles, or if it just feels a bit scary to lift up onto the toes, you could start the pose by bringing a block under the heels. So bringing heels on top of a block. And here I am already standing on the balls of the feet on the toes. So I could practice it here. Or then if I start to feel that, okay, I can start to work a bit more through the ankles, through the feet, I could just lift the heels slightly off that block. But I know that I have the block there if I feel like I need to come down. So the heels are not so far away from the mat that I feel I'm gonna then collapse down. But it's just a small way away from that block. So what I'm doing, I'm lifting the floor to my heels. I'm elevating the floor under the heels. So that would be quite a nice way to use the block as well. Then the strap. The strap would be now for the arms, for the hands. So if we are doing a variation where the arms are in front of us or even over the head, you could bring a strap of some kind between your hands. So you're holding it between the hands, and what that might do is it will help us to engage a bit more through the arms, and it might be also quite grounding. Sometimes we don't really know what to do with the arms, and the arms are not really helping in the pose. But having something in the hands might help you build more connection through the arms and feel the core more as well. So that's one way of using the strap between the hands. And then we have the wall. If for any reason you feel maybe a bit wobbly when you're just standing and you'd like to have some support for your balance, you could use the wall. You could bring hand onto the wall, whether you're doing your feet on the mat or especially when you're lifting the heels up. The wall could be a really nice prop to keep you balanced. Again, feel more safe. You can also practice with your back against the wall, or just knowing that the wall is there. If for any reason you think you might fall down, the wall is going to catch you. So you can also practice the pose with your pelvis, with your back against the wall. So wall can be a really handy prop for mountain pose as well. Mountain pose is maybe one of the safest poses because we are just standing, but it's a great way to rehabilitate the feet, ankles, strengthen the legs after injuries, but also strengthen them so there would not be an injury in the future. But be mindful of the feet, the ankles, especially if you know you have had an injury there, and maybe avoid lifting the heels off the mat if you know the feet, the ankles are not yet strong enough to do that. So you could always stay on the whole foot, even if the teacher cues to lift the heels off the mat. And if you know you have injuries in the knees, maybe keep that slight micro bend in the knees. So again, you avoid locking the knees and just hanging on the knee joint. Keep the muscles around the knees active. Make sure the pose doesn't hurt in the knees. If you have lower back injuries, again, be more mindful of that core engagement. So you're not letting the belly sink out. You're not pushing into the lower back, but you keep that activation going on. Again, if you know that you need to strengthen the core, support the lower back more, it's a really good pose to do this in a safe way. And if there is any kind of risk of fall, if you're pregnant, if you know you have anything in the bones that falling would be dangerous for your bones, then practice near the wall. Remember, you can use the wall as a support. So you could have a hand on the wall, you could have your back against the wall. So the wall makes the pose even safer. As always, if you have injuries, if you have existing medical conditions that make you a bit worried about practicing this pose, then always talk to your medical professional before practicing the pose. If you have any questions or thoughts about the pose, let me know. Leave a comment below and I'm really happy to chat more. Thanks for watching. I hope you found that useful. If you did, click subscribe and hit the bell icon so you'll be notified of any new videos. I'll be posting lots more yoga related videos on this channel. I also teach online yoga classes, and if you're interested in those, you'll find more information in the description box below and on my website. I'll see you on the next video. Bye.